Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Welcome to my channel, Out of the Past, where I talk about classic movies. And this is the latest episode of my weekly podcast, the Classic Movie Roundup, where I talk about 3 classic movies, the book I'm currently reading, and I follow that up with a wildcard segment. So if you're interested and that sounds good to you, keep watching. The first film I'm talking about today is the obscure Christmas classic Beyond Tomorrow from 1940. Directed by A. Edward Sutherland, Beyond Tomorrow starts on Christmas Eve in New York City. We see 3 older men in an apartment. They are engineers at a firm and are working furiously on a new project. Charles Winninger, who plays Michael, is trying to convince the other 2, George, played by Harry Carey, and Alan, played by C. Aubrey Smith, to stop working and enjoy the holiday. The household is looked over by Madame Tanya, played by Maria Uspenskaya, a former Russian countess who fled with her butler from Russia to the States and were taken in by the 3 men. In an effort to spread Christmas cheer, Michael has the idea to throw 3 wallets out the window, each with $10 and a business card from each of the men. 2 of those wallets are returned by strangers. The men meet James Houston, a handsome young singer from Texas played by Richard Carlson, and Jean, a kind-hearted young woman played by Jean Parker. The 3 men invite these 2 to spend Christmas Eve with them, and they all soon become fast friends. Now, here is where the story takes a dark turn. The following month, the 3 men die in a plane crash. Their ghosts return to look over their friends, James and Jean. The 3 men are sort of in an in-between space. Their spirits are residing on Earth before they're called to either heaven or hell. And while they remain on Earth, the men, Michael in particular, try to help James, who is quickly being led astray. So this is my second time watching Beyond Tomorrow. I was reminded of the film when I read this book recently, Christmas in the Movies, which I reviewed last week, and I'll leave a link above so you can check that review. And I really like this movie. I don't tend to like stories about the afterlife, and it's funny because I actually picked 2 movies about that for this episode. But I like how the afterlife is handled here. And I think what makes up for it is Charles Winninger. He's just so charming as Michael, and you kind of want to see him succeed in the afterlife with all of his efforts to help his friends in the living realm. And this movie is also just the Christmas elements, which are really just like the first part of the movie. It's just like full of like that Christmas cheer. Like you kind of want to get a cup of hot cocoa or a Tom and Jerry cocktail like they have in the movie, which, you know, has egg whites. I feel like all cocktails back then had egg whites, so maybe not. Maybe just stick to a hot cocoa. But I like how the Michael character, played by Charles Winninger, kind of embodies the Christmas spirit. And he reminds me a little bit of Henry Travers as Clarence the Angel in It's a Wonderful Life. I think those two movies actually would pair quite nicely together. It's a Wonderful Life and Beyond Tomorrow. And Richard Carlson and Jean Parker, they're sweet in the movie, but they don't really have much chemistry together. But Richard Carlson, though, is at his most gorgeous. He's so beautiful in this film. And we see his character like pursue this career in radio as a singer, and I had no clue that Richard Carlson was such a talented singer, and he sings several songs in this movie, and he has this amazingly beautiful voice. And I did learn recently that he uses his singing voice in like another movie, but not so much in the rest of his career, which seems like a shame. And for the 3 like main characters, like Charles Winninger's character, Harry Carey, and C. Aubrey Smith, I like how they have 3 distinct personalities. Like Charles Winninger's character is warmth, and C. Aubrey Smith is like tepid, and then Harry Carey is just like ice cold, and they kind of represent those kind of sentiments. And then Harry Carey's character has like he's basically like this bah humbug character who kind of needs to face the error of his ways, which I think is really interesting. Also, like Richard Carlson, he starts off as like very kind and genuine, and then he has like a downfall, and he has to also kind of see the error of his ways. So that kind of adds like a more morality like element to the story. And this is like a rather sentimental movie. It's one of the few times that the title actually makes sense for the story, because this is how I think of it. Because like movies from this era, especially B pictures, the titles sometimes or very often like did not make sense for the plot. They have like nothing to do with each other, or they're a name of a song, or they're just like something that would titillate an audience to come see a movie. But oftentimes they didn't say anything, and I think this is an interesting case in which the title could mean something, because if you think about it, the characters in the movie are doing good things around Christmas time, but they also have to think about what happens after Christmas, beyond tomorrow, like what happens in the future. And there's no future in the flesh for the three men, but they have to think about the beyond, what's going to happen to them after they stop haunting the like earth and go either to hell or to heaven. So and then you also have Gene Parker and Richard Carlson's characters who have to think about what's going to happen beyond tomorrow for their relationship, which starts off really great but then goes downhill. So I like the idea that it's that like the good cheer of Christmas, like that feeling of, being neighborly, embracing others, being of service to others, should go beyond Christmas, beyond tomorrow. And I love that line that Charles Winninger says in the movie, that there are no strangers on Christmas Eve. And that just made me really think about things, about how this movie really captures that neighborly spirit. Okay, now to my notes about the interesting facts about this movie. Beyond Tomorrow was based on an original screenplay by two women screenwriters, Mildred Cram and Adele Comandini. And I was like obsessed with learning everything about Adele Comandini that I could, and there's not really much out there. So this is what I learned about her. She was the daughter of Italian immigrants and was raised in the Bronx. She moved to Los Angeles probably sometime in like the 1920s or 30s. And her story started to become adapted, and her scenarios into film. And then she moved to Los Angeles and became a bona fide screenwriter for studios. I did discover that she co-wrote Christmas in Connecticut, which is one of my absolute top favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite Christmas movies. She got, her big break was actually writing the screenplay for Three Smart Girls. And then she also co-wrote the one for Beyond Tomorrow. And it's interesting because she actually was listed as associate producer, which I think is interesting for this particular movie, because you don't usually see that for a screenwriter. And then I found out that she eventually went to work for TV, writing television episodes, and she also was a biographer. She wrote several biographies about interesting women, like doctors and things. So I thought that was interesting. I did find a piece in the International Photographer magazine from 1940, which discussed the fact that the producer on Beyond Tomorrow, Lee Garms, was looking for money. He was looking for a good story, and he wanted a major release. And so when Adele Comandini found out that what Lee Garms was looking for, she approached him with a story that she created with Mildred Graham called Beyond Tomorrow. And the producer, Lee Garms, really liked it. He went and found a financial backer. RKO was really interested, and they agreed to the picture. And because of her approaching Lee Garms with the project, that's how she became associate producer, which I thought was really interesting. She had a lot of gumption. And what's interesting too is that this came out in 1943. Oh wait, was it 1943? No, it's not. It's 1940. I don't know why I said 1943. So 1940, you have like the outbreak of World War II, and what's interesting about that is that for this movie, it ended up losing its financial banking. The bank kind of freaked out and was like, okay, we need to save money because there's war going on. And this was before the US actually entered World War II, but of course it's the tensions everywhere. So Lee Garms was like out of money. He's like, okay, I have nothing to find it. So the RKO president, the president of RKO, George Schaefer, really believed in this project. Like, a lot of people firmly believed it. You have the two screenwriters who were passionate about the story, especially Adele Comandini, who was forward enough to go and pitch this to a producer. You have the producer himself, Lee Garms, who felt really strongly about this movie and went to great efforts to make it. And then you have the head of RKO at the time, which was George Schaefer, and he really believed in the project too. So George Schaefer ended up bringing it to Bank of America, and Bank of America ended up funding the movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And there, as I said, this was in the book Christmas in the Movies, which I reviewed previous week. So I just wanted to share some insights from that book that Jeremy Arnold, the author, had shared. Critics did not find this film well. They didn't like the shift to fantasy and found it outlandish, which I thought was interesting. He does talk about the ghostly effects. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book. It says, the transparent ghost effects were praised at the time and were created not by double exposures, but by filming reflections of actors on mirror image, hidden sets through angled glass, an old magic technique known as Pepper's Ghost. I thought that was interesting. Beyond Tomorrow is available through various sources. It's actually in the public domain, so everyone's kind of free to post it online or make it available or sell it as they want. You can find it on the free streaming services like Tubi and Pluto and Plex, but you have to watch them with ads. There are a few versions of it of varying quality on YouTube. I recently watched it because I recorded it again, because I had recorded it before on TCM, and they're showing it again on the 22nd and the 24th of December. So if you want to watch it that way, you can DVR it or watch it live. The quality is not great because of the public domain, so it's quite fuzzy. Even the TCM version wasn't very good, but it's worth watching. Just avoid the colorized version. There is one of those, and I always say don't watch the colorized version of a black and white film. They're usually not that great. And there is a DVD available of Beyond Tomorrow if you're interested in getting the physical media version. The next film is Tall, Dark, and Handsome from 1941, and this was a recommendation from a subscriber, and thank you so much for the recommendation. And if you have any movies that you're interested in me talking about on this series, let me know. Just leave a comment in this video or any of my other videos. Set in late 1920s Chicago before the Great Depression, this film stars Cesar Romero as Shep Morrison, a Chicago mobster known as the boss of the South Side. It's Christmas time, and while the city gangsters are all up to no good, Shep is feeling the Christmas spirit. He's a tough guy with a benevolent streak. On Christmas Eve, he spots shop girl Judy, played by Virginia Gilmore, as she tends to the children at a department store. Entranced by her beauty and kind spirit, he makes up a ruse that he's a widowed father of one who works in the banking industry and needs someone to care for his young son. He hires Judy on the spot, and the pay is too good for her to pass up. Problem is, Shep is really a single man with no child of his own. The orphan son of another gangster, Detroit Harry Jr., played by Stanley Clements, is tasked with pretending to be Shep's son. Others who help keep up the ruse are Shep's right-hand henchman, Frosty Welch, played by Milton Berle, and one of Shep's star performers at his nightclub, Winnie, played by Charlotte Greenwood. Hiding his gangster life from Judy as he courts her and helps her with her singing career is not easy. He's got rival gangster Pretty Willie, played by Sheldon Leonard, breathing down his neck. And Shep's also got a basement jail full of gangsters that he was too kind to actually knock off. What happens when Judy finds out that Shep isn't really who he says he is? I found this to be a fairly enjoyable film. It doesn't hurt that Cesar Romero's in it. I absolutely adore him. And I like that it's a gangster comedy with a dash of Christmas. And I was talking to my friend Jessica about whether this movie is like a Christmas movie or not a Christmas movie. I mean, the Christmas part is really only the first 30 minutes of the movie. And the rest of the movie, which is another 48 minutes, has like absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. Like Christmas is just not even the theme of like Christmas cheer or anything happens throughout the rest of the movie. It becomes a different story. So, but Christmas is very heavily presented in the first 30 minutes. You have, Cesar Romero and Virginia Gilmore decorating a Christmas tree and kind of flirting with each other. It opens on Christmas Eve in 1928. And there's a lot of mentions of Christmas. There's Christmas in the department store. Christmas is very heavily mentioned. And if it had taken place over a shorter period of time, it could have been like a Christmas gangster comedy. And I think that would have helped the movie in terms of not being so obscure, because this is one I hadn't heard of, and not a lot of people know of. So had it been like all Christmas, then maybe even ending with New Year's, it could have been like a Christmas classic, one that maybe had a little more longevity, which Christmas movies that are really, really full on the holiday tend to do. And I was actually sad that this one didn't feature any New Year's sequences. And I figured that because the Cesar Romero character has a nightclub, that it could have had New Year's. Like they could have had a New Year's party at the nightclub, but they didn't. I was really, really upset about that. But I really did like the whole concept of Cesar Romero playing, this mobster with like a good heart, not like a heart of gold, but a good heart. He's still a little selfish, but he can't bring himself to actually kill any of the gangsters he keeps in his basement, which I think is interesting. And I think it's a sweet little movie with sort of like an edge. Like it's got the gangster storyline, so it adds a little more of a dangerous element to what otherwise would be just kind of a sweet romantic comedy set around the Christmas holiday. So interesting facts about the movie. This movie was made by 20th Century Fox. It was initially going to be a B-level picture, but the studio increased the budget and made it an A picture, A status. So Cesar Romero was under contract before with Universal, but after 1937, he was under contract with Fox. And around the time that Tall, Dark, and Handsome was made, he was kind of coming into his own as a movie star. He was starring in the Cisco Kid movies. He had like taken over the role. But Tall, Dark, and Handsome is his like first sort of like leading man role in a like proper A-level picture, since that was more of a series. So that was interesting. I did, in my research, come across this magazine that was just called Hollywood from 1941, and it said this. It said, Hollywood let Cesar Romero kick around 7 years before realizing he was star material. It was public demand, not studio moguls, that finally made a star of the handsome Latin. So that was interesting. Like, this is really what kickstarts his career, and the public really was clamoring over Cesar Romero because he was just so charming and he had this wonderful screen presence. And remember, this is way before his like television career and what he's mostly known for, but he was the handsome Latin of cinema at 20th Century Fox back in the 40s. So this movie was actually originally going to star Betty Grable and Jack Oakie. And there was even discussion that S.C. Sakal, the lovable actor, who we call Cuddles, who was in Christmas in Connecticut, another mention of one of my favorite movies, he was going to play like a comedic gangster, but none of those actors ended up in the film. Oakie was replaced by Romero, and then Betty Grable was replaced by Virginia Gilmore. Now, Charlotte Greenwood, who plays Winnie, had a long career as a character actress. She was a vaudeville performer who was known for her splits and her kicks. She was famously double jointed and dubbed Lady Longlegs. And in this movie, there's this little sequence where she shows off her signature moves. It's about 11 minutes into the movie. And Charlotte Greenwood played a lot of sidekicks in her career, and so did Milton Berle at the time. Now, that's another figure who we're more, we know more about him in his later career as a public figure on television and movies, but in this period, he was playing sidekicks. Like Tall, Dark, and Handsome was the first movie he had made in like 3 years. So when he started with Tall, Dark, and Handsome and then continued with Fox, he was playing the sidekick to the leading man in these A pictures. And another one that comes to mind is Sun Valley Serenade. He plays kind of the same sort of role. So this was his like era of being like the sidekick in these big movies. So child actor Stanley Clements made his screen debut in this film. He almost steals the picture. He's so adorable at this tough, like young little gangster, and he's very undisciplined, but he's also got a good heart. It's almost like he's the miniature version of the Cesar Romero character. And famously, like Clements went on to marry Gloria Graham. I don't know much about that union, but I thought that was interesting. So Tall, Dark, and Handsome was based on a screenplay by Daryl Ware and Carl Tunberg, and their screenplay for this movie was nominated for Academy Award. So that was the only award nomination for this movie. And for some reason, this movie got in trouble with the censors. Like, it was banned in Sweden, and I couldn't find out why it was banned in Sweden, but it was banned in Sweden. And the Production Code Administration, which enforced the Hays Code, had huge problems with it. They demanded that there were several like suggestive lines of dialogue about, I think, sex and crime that had to be taken out. The Cesar Romero character having like that basement full of gangsters, in the story, like he captures the gangsters and he keeps them hidden, but publicly within like the world of the story, they're considered dead. Like everyone thinks that those missing gangsters are dead, that they were just killed basically in gang war. And I think that that's how they kept the gangster storyline in the age of the Hays Code, where you could not have a criminal get away with his crimes. And because the gangsters are all alive in the basement and then they're released eventually, there was no crime, so Cesar Romero's character can have his happy ending. Okay, Tall, Dark, and Handsome was remade only 9 years later by Fox in a movie called Love That Brute from 1950. Cesar Romero is in that, but he's playing the rival gangster, kind of like how Sheldon Leonard does in Tall, Dark, and Handsome. He plays Pretty Willie. And the character that he had is actually played by Paul Douglas in the movie. And also in the movie you have you have Keenan Wynn in the Milton Berle role. You have Joan Davis in the Charlotte Greenwood role. Peter Price in the Stanley Clements role. So they did a lot of swapping. So if you're interested in watching Tall, Dark, and Handsome, it's available to rent on video on demand on various services. There is a made-on-demand DVD made available from 20th Century Fox Cinema Archives, which was something that was like a series like a little while ago. It's also free to watch on YouTube, as is the remake. So I'll link those two down below. And thank you to the commenter for suggesting the movie. I really enjoyed this one. Next movie I'm going to be talking about is the MGM musical Cabin in the Sky from 1943. The film stars Ethel Waters as Petunia Jackson. She's the pious and long-suffering wife to Little Joe, played by Eddie Rochester Anderson. Petunia loves Little Joe so much so that she'll do anything for him. She hopes that time at church will help Little Joe see the light and give up his gambling addiction. After church service one Sunday, Little Joe is taken to the saloon by some fellow gamblers to whom he owes some money. Little Joe is shot in a tussle, and Petunia takes him home, hoping to save his life. When Little Joe dies, he meets Lucifer Jr., played by Rex Ingram, who has arrived to take little Joe to hell. Angel Sergeant Fleetfoot, played by Oscar Polk, intervenes, and it's said that because Petunia is so faithful that little Joe will get another chance at life. He has 6 more months to change his ways so that he can go to heaven. Little Joe regains consciousness but forgets everything that happened with Lucifer and Fleetfoot. The angel and the demon are watching little Joe's every move and using their divine powers to influence the living. Little Joe is thrown a curveball when he wins a local lottery. The new influx of cash draws attention of the beautiful Georgia Brown, played by Lena Horne, and little Joe struggles to stay faithful to Petunia. Will little Joe redeem himself before it's too late? Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather, which came out the same year, are 2 of my favorite musicals of all time. So it was just a joy to revisit Cabin in the Sky for this viewing. I love that this movie boasts some of the best talents of the era. You have Ethel Waters and Lena Horne, and you got Louis Armstrong and Rex Ingram. You even have like Butterfly McQueen, I adore her, and like so on and so forth. There's like so many wonderful actors from that era. And this is an absolute treasure. I love how it combines like parable and folklore into this like all black musical, and you have these very like spirited musical sequences, and some have dance and some are just song, and it's just a gem of a movie. It's a wonderful era of filmmaking, and to have this all black musical is just really, really special. Okay, some interesting facts about Cabin in the Sky. This was a Broadway production from 1940 starring Catherine Durham and Julie Wilson, and Ethel Waters and Rex Ingram were also in that original production and were in the movie adaptation. Now, the film was produced by MGM at the Arthur Freed unit, which was pretty much Arthur Freed's section of MGM where he made musicals. And this was directed by Vincent Minnelli, and this was his first like solo directorial debut. I did see one source say that the script was sent from Vincent Minnelli and Arthur Freed to the NAACP for their approval. And while the film doesn't have like the best, like the perfect depiction of black characters, it does try to avoid some of those like stereotypes that were depicted in other films of the era. So it's a little bit of a mixed representation, but it's an improvement on other films that came before it and during that same era. So according to Donald Bogle, the film historian who's an expert on black cinema, I have a lot of like interesting research from him. Vincent Minnelli wanted Julie Wilson, who played the Little Joe character in the Broadway production, to be in the film, but Eddie Rochester Anderson, who does end up playing Little Joe in the movie, was much more well known, and MGM really wanted a big name. So when he got like sort of top billing, but sort of also side by side billing with Ethel Waters. So also, Cab Calloway and Paul Robeson were considered for parts in the film, and I did read that Paul Robeson was just like, no thanks. As I mentioned before, Louis Armstrong is in this movie, the great jazz legend, sometimes actor. He just like, I love when he shows up in movies because he's just got a great screen presence. He plays like this trumpet playing demon, and he doesn't have a lot of screen time. He has a little bit of dialogue. He gets to play the trumpet. He was supposed to have this whole musical number called Ain't It the Truth, and that scene was cut. So that's why he's in the movie, but he's not utilized as well. Other people you might notice is anyone who's a fan of Dorothy Dandridge will recognize Ruby, her mom, and Vivian, her sister, who both have small roles in the movie. I did read that Juano Hernandez, who's one of my absolute favorite actors of all time, he's supposed to be in the movie. IMDb lists him as Neighbor. I scanned the movie several times and I could not find him. So I don't know if maybe he's listed and he really wasn't in the movie, or he was in a deleted scene. There was actually quite a number of scenes deleted, so it could be that case. So I did want to point out too that the musical number Shine, performed by John W. Bubbles, was actually directed by the great Busby Berkeley, who, you know, he was a dance director known for those like elaborate and artfully choreographed musical sequences in Hollywood films like Gold Diggers of 1933. So I thought it was interesting. He's the only like other director to come in to work on a scene. Otherwise, it was all done by Vincent Minnelli. Now about the two female leads, Ethel Waters and Lena Horne, which Donald Bogle writes extensively about the fact that they did not get along on set, and that made for like a complicated production, and how both Ethel Waters and Lena Horne's different characters were represented. So Ethel Waters actually originally turned down the role of Petunia because, quote, in the original script, she was no more than a punching bag for little Joe, which I thought was interesting. And because of Ethel Waters' star power, when she did take on the role, she used her influence to kind of build up the role. She added some lines of dialogue and really built up the character. So it improved the depiction of Petunia on screen, which I thought was really, really cool. Go Ethel Waters. Now, Lena Horne was very new. This was her first credited role in a studio film. This wasn't her first film. Her first film was a independently produced all-black musical called The Duke is Tops from 1938. And she also was in, I think, Panama Hattie at MGM shortly before making Cabin in the Sky. But Cabin in the Sky is her first like credited major studio movie. So the character of Georgia Brown she plays was like the Ethel Waters character Petunia. Hers was changed and kind of built up to so that Lena Horne could be properly showcased in the film. She doesn't show up until like 44 minutes into the movie. So those scenes that she's in for the rest of the movie really have to count to justify her presence. So she is third billed in the movie, which I think is really fantastic. And she was labeled at the time as the sensational new song stylist. Now, Cabin in the Sky is available on DVD, and I'm so sorry I forgot to hold this up earlier. It's available on DVD MOD, made on demand, from the Warner Archive collection, which I have here. This has no extras. This is just very plain Jane. I did read that this movie was filmed in sepia and it's also available in black and white. This is just the black and white version. So if you wanted to see the sepia version, this is not it. I also found that it's available to rent on video on demand on Amazon, YouTube, and other platforms. And as of recording this video today, Donald Bogle will be on Turner Classic Movies tonight talking about Lena Horne, and we'll be showing Cabin in the Sky. And I believe this is the first movie in the lineup that they're showing. And that leads me into the book of this week, which is this one right here, Lena Horne, Goddess Reclaimed by Donald Bogle. This is the book that he's going to be talking on TCM tonight. And I have been so looking forward to this book. It came out last month, and I really enjoy Donald Bogle's books. I have a review of Hollywood Black on this channel, which I'll link above if you want to watch. I mean, he just does amazing work. He's like the leading expert on Black cinema, so you know that he's going to be a really great source. And I just love, this is from TCM and Running Press, and this is like this gorgeous, stunning jacketed hardcover book. Here's the back of it. And I just want to show you quickly the self cover, which is also very gorgeous. You have Lena Horne there on the front, and then on the back. Isn't that stunning? So I only just started reading this book, so I don't have a review for you yet, but I did want to share a couple of things. This is a quote from the publisher, Running Press. Let me just put this jacket back on the book. So the quote reads, "This is the first book to provide Horne or any Black performer of her era with the type of glamorous, illustrated treatment and in-depth analysis that for decades has been lavished on white movie stars. Many of the photos are never before published." So that is the angle they're pitching, and I thought that was really interesting how this is presented in a very glamorous way and that it has never before seen pictures, which I think is really cool. And in the introduction, Donald Bogle has this great quote about meeting Lena Horne. He met her twice, and I just wanted to read that to you here as well. "The first time I met her, I was enthralled. She was a great star who hadn't lost her common touch. She still wanted to communicate, and somehow her vast experiences in a personal and dynamic way. The second time, I was again enthralled, but I realized there was something indefinable about her. She was a luminous, compelling mystery. Unlocking the doors to her identity has been energizing and revelatory. Her magnetism cannot be overstated." I just thought that was so powerful, and I'm just so excited to dive into this book. I'm about like 30 or 40 pages in. I'm not that far in. But I did end up going a little further into the book and reading the section on Cabin in the Sky. So some of that information I put in here. So I'll definitely be talking about this at length in a future episode. And now for this week's wildcard segment. This weekend was the memorial service for actor Edmund Gwenn at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. You may recognize Edmund Gwenn from playing Kris Kringle in the Christmas classic The Miracle on 34th Street from 1947. Now, Gwenn died in 1959, and back then his ashes were placed in an urn and kept in a basement vault at the Chapel of the Pines Crematory in Los Angeles, where he's been ever since. It may have been the case that when he died, there was no one available or willing to claim his remains for him to have like a proper burial or placement. Now, a few months ago, the excellent YouTube channel Hollywood Graveyard, hosted by Arthur Dark, did an episode on the Chapel of the Pines, and it was really fascinating. I wanted to watch it. So one of the great moments in that episode is when they find Gwenn's urn in vault number 5. And I'll link it down below so you can watch it. The efforts after that video was made were to fund a proper ceremony and place Edmund Gwenn's ashes at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So that happened this weekend. My good friend Laura of Laura's Miscellaneous Musings attended that ceremony, and she sent me some pictures, which I'll share with you. Jeremy Arnold, author of the Christmas in the Movies book that I recently reviewed, also attended, which seemed very fitting. This made me really happy to see that Edmund Gwenn, someone who made a significant contribution to like the history of Christmas movies, now has a proper resting place. So I'll leave a link down below to both the Hollywood Graveyard video and to Laura's coverage of the event. Well, that's all for this week's episode. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment in the section below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.